Welcome to the weekly Dharma gathering. My name is Gail Spiva, and tonight's session will be led by Sheena Brockington-Taylor and is titled The Heart is Talking. Sheena will lead us through a guided meditation, Dharma talk, and will close with a Q&A discussion. Tonight's session will be recorded, so if you prefer not to be seen, please turn off your camera feature. Please note that you will also be recorded when asking a question. Also, if you have a question during the guided instruction or the talk, please feel free to enter it into the chat box at any time, and we'll be able to address it during the discussion period. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed within 48 hours via your purchased products on your Vimeo weekly Dharma gathering account. You'll receive an email notification once it's posted. Bio for Sheena is Sheena Brockington-Taylor, she, her, and hers pronouns, is a Baltimore-based marketing consultant for health, wellness, and lifestyle brands, and is growth product manager for the weekly Dharma gathering. She is also a restorative yoga teacher, meditation teacher, and mindful leadership facilitator, exploring the intersection of women's leadership and wellness. She proudly serves on the Mind Oasis Board of Directors as VP of Outreach and Advancement. And let me go and spotlight Sheena. There you go.
Thank you so much, Gail, for the introduction. And thank you to everyone showing up live. And also thank you to those who are watching the recording. As Gail said, my name is Sheena. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm on the ancestral land of the Piscataway people in Baltimore, Maryland. I want to start tonight's talk by just sending love to the Asian community in a time when we've seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiment, including the inexcusable acts of violence we witnessed last night. There's not a word sufficient enough to describe the negative impacts white supremacy continues to have on this world. And if we could all just take a moment, silence, to hold space for the collective grief that we're experiencing at this moment, and just sending our deepest compassion to the Asian community who are a part of our larger community of the world. So just take a minute. Just send some love. Thank you so much. I also want to honor our practice's ancient roots and all of the knowledge that has been shared with the Western world. And just give thanks to all of my teachers and the Sanghas that are helping shape my practice, but also the teachers and Sanghas who are helping to just shape your practices. I come to you tonight as a student, just trying to synthesize things that I've learned and what I continue to learn into practices that hold me when I'm off my yoga mat and when I'm off my cushion and I'm actually out in the world. And so tonight will be a mixture of meditation. I'll do a brief talk. We'll probably meditate again. And then just a short journal exercise. And then we'll talk. I don't like to think of the end as like a Q&A, just like to think of it as just a place of discussion to talk about whatever is coming to mind around compassion. So I'll start with a meditation. But before I do that, just want to invite you to get a pen or pencil or paper so that when we get to the journaling portion, if you'd like to participate in that, you have supplies available. So I'll give folks a couple of seconds to just grab what you need. And so we will start with the meditation to just bring our minds, bodies, and our hearts to this space together. And then we'll dive into our talk. So you can start by just taking whatever posture offers you the most ease in this moment. So feel free to sit, walk. If you want to lie down, that's also okay. I just invite you to ask your body what it needs right now and to just listen. The most important thing right now is to just approach this with an open heart. And if you are sitting in a chair, you might place your feet on the floor, just trying to ground yourself into the earth a bit. And if you're seated on a cushion or a wedge, folded blanket, you can see if you can fold your legs if that feels comfortable. Just maybe making sure your hips are a bit higher than your knees. Place your hands on your thighs or in your lap if that's comfortable. And before you close your eyes or lower your gaze, just take a moment and scan the space around you. So you can do it just with your eyes, or you can turn your head side to side and just take in the space. And just existing in this moment, present with the space. Present with your body. And present with your breath. And when you're ready, I invite you to close your eyes or keep them open with a downward gaze if that feels comfortable. And you can slightly tuck your chin. And let's take a moment to check in with your body. Notice any sensations you feel. And if you don't feel any sensation, that's perfectly okay too. You're just noticing. Go ahead and direct your attention to your breath. Just noticing the rise and fall of your body as you breathe. Feeling into your body. Feeling into your heart. And asking the question, how does your body feel today? You might consider what emotions are present for you. And just briefly bringing your attention to any thoughts that may be floating through your mind. And as you sit and thoughts float through your mind, it's a perfect opportunity to offer yourself some love, compassion, some kindness, and just acknowledging those thoughts with no judgment. Bringing your attention to your five senses. Maybe recalling the last thing you saw before you closed your eyes or lowered your gaze. Feeling the air as it touches your skin. Is it warm? Is it cold? And does it feel just right? You might move your tongue around in your mouth or lick your lips and see if you recognize any taste lingering. And on your next inhale, see if you notice any scents in the air. And if you listen in closely, do you hear anything? And what's the furthest sound you hear? And what's the closest sound you hear? Bringing your attention back to your breath. Once again, just noticing any movement in your body as you inhale and as you exhale. Soften your toes, your feet, your legs, relaxing your body on the left side, on the right side, seeing if you can feel and find a little ease in your back, a little ease in your stomach. Softening your arms, your hands, your fingers, dropping your shoulders, adding some ease to your neck, your jaw, your mouth, your eyes, moving up to the top of your head. See if you can just notice your breath. And just adopting the most natural breathing rhythm. Just giving yourself permission to sit with your breath. Letting your breath be your anchor. And trusting your breath to hold you. To hold what your heart most desires today. And to hold your practice. And we'll sit in silence for the next 3 minutes. Just bringing your attention to your breath. And when thoughts pop up or emotions pop up, offer yourself some kindness, maybe even a gentle smile. Acknowledge them, and then direct your attention back to your breath with no judgment. And on your next exhale, I invite you to just let out an audible sigh. And when that feels complete for you, you can take one hand and put it over your heart if that feels comfortable. And I invite you to dedicate the merit of your practice. And when that feels complete for you, you can start to bring yourself back to our shared space. You might wiggle fingers, wiggle toes, blink your eyes open slowly. Thank you for your practice. And so tonight's talk is entitled The Heart is Talking, an exploration of the beauty and practice of compassion. And as I mentioned, I very much consider myself a student. And what I do is take what I learned from my teachers take what I learned from my Sangha and take what I learned from whatever I'm reading. And I try to drill it into something practical for myself. And in doing that, I hope that I'm also able to share it with other people and they can take something from it. And so tonight, that's what I'm doing. And so in Buddhism, we hear of the 4 immeasurables, which maybe you've also heard referred to as the 4 qualities of love. And so that's joy, love, equanimity, and compassion. And so the idea is that they are boundless and limitless and offer us a spaciousness to experience the world and the people around us more fully, more deeply. And these practices are meant to open our hearts. And for tonight's talk, we'll focus on compassion. And the Sanskrit word for compassion is karuna. And we'll talk about what it means, but we'll talk about what it means as an act. Like, what is the act of compassion? What's a practical way we can practice compassion in our everyday lives? And that looks different for everyone, the actual act. But what I want to do is run you through just what I've come up with to even get myself in a place to be able to offer the act of compassion to another person or group of people. And so we start by having this knowing that our compassion has to be expansive, right? It's not a thing we limit to just having compassion for ourselves or just having compassion for the people who we love and hold dearly. So our family and our friends. We also extend compassion and acts of compassion to strangers, right? So maybe it's the grocery store clerk, or maybe it's a neighbor, or maybe it's the person delivering your food. And then it's also that person who, when we're doing the loving kindness or meditation, it's also that person who, we're asked, think of a person who's difficult to love. And depending on the week or month or year, for me, that list can be a little long, a list of people who are difficult to love. So it's been an ongoing practice for me to be able to do a loving kindness meditation and populate a name and send that person loving kindness. And it's also been a practice to be able to offer those difficult to love people compassion. We're human. And sometimes it's challenging to offer that to some people. But even the people in our lives who we see as difficult to love at one time or another, they still deserve compassion. And part of our meditation practice is to soften us a bit, to break our hearts open a bit, and to lead us to an understanding that every being suffers. And that suffering isn't something we can run away from, right? As long as we're breathing, even if we sit on a cushion every day, suffering exists in the world. And it's our collective responsibility to offer a bit of compassion. And so I came to this idea for a talk because I was faced with what I would consider my biggest challenge in the fall. And I had to really look at compassion in a new way. And I had to open myself to doing compassion as an act for a person who I previously thought was difficult to love. This person moved into my home, needed care, and was facing mortality. And this was a person who I previously believed had contributed to my heart breaking in many ways. But through this experience and through this practice of compassion as an act and forcing myself to commit to acts of compassion towards this person, my heart broke open, and in a whole new way that I could have never imagined. And if I didn't open myself up to compassion, I wouldn't have had this surprisingly beautiful experience. So then it's like getting to compassion, like, you know, the act of getting there. It took a lot of work. It took a lot of sitting meditation. It took a lot of walking meditation, journaling. It took some time with my therapist. And now that this experience has like happened, and this person who I previously thought was difficult to love and who I came to love really deeply has passed on, I had to sit and say, okay, well, what did I do? Like, what were the steps that I took to allow myself to offer compassion? So I sat with everything, every tool and resource that I worked through during this time, and then just kind of mapped out some steps for myself as a bit of a blueprint for myself to go back to. And so that's what I want to share with you tonight. It's a pretty simple process, 10 steps, which probably sounds like a lot, right? But 5 of those steps are taking a breath. And so before I go through these 10 steps, I'd like you to just get comfortable and whatever position feels good for you. And you can go back to closing your eyes if that's comfortable, or just a downward gaze. But I just want you to visualize a bit as I go through these steps that have worked for me and I'm continuing to try to refine and put into practice. And so instead of us focusing on a difficult person, I invite you to, if you can, if it feels available to you, to bring to mind a person who you know is suffering, right? And maybe it's a person whose suffering is far removed from you, right? Or maybe it's a person who's suffering and you haven't been able to find time to show them compassion yet. Or maybe it's a person who you know they're suffering, but you're not really sure where to start the process. And so the steps that I am and have cycled through start like this. So the very first step is recognizing the suffering or the misfortune or the broken heart of that other person. So it's a noticing, it's an awareness. And after recognizing the suffering, the second step is literally taking a breath. And after you take that breath, the third step is to show concern. And showing concern looks different to each person. So bring to mind what it looks like to you to show concern. And then the fourth step is to take a breath. And then we move into that fifth step, which is listening. And it's the deep listening you do, where you really hear what the person is saying, no interrupting. You're not waiting to just respond. Just good, deep listening. Listening to them as they talk about, maybe they're talking about how they're suffering. Maybe they're talking about their emotions. Your only job at that point is to listen. And the sixth step after listening is to take a breath. And as you take that breath, you start easing yourself into a place of understanding, which is the seventh step. You're trying to process what it is that they told you while you were doing your deep listening. You're trying to understand their suffering. You're understanding it from their point of view because you've listened to them. And then when you feel like you're in a place of understanding, you might even repeat back to them what they said to you to make sure you have a clear understanding of what they're communicating. And then step 8 is taking a breath. And it's like as you cycle through steps 1 through 8, you're moving to a place where you're synthesizing everything from those steps to determine the best way you can assist that person in a way that serves their needs versus what you think they need. And then when you move into step 9, that's actually assisting. So that's the actual act of compassion, right? So of course, listening and coming to a place of understanding and recognizing all of that goes into showing compassion. But at step 9, it's really putting into play what needs to happen to show compassion to this person. And then the 10th step is, in case you haven't guessed it, taking a breath. And with each step, there's this breath in between that's partially for your own self-care, right? Because in order for us to be able to show love, show compassion, and pour into other people, we also have to take care of ourselves. But it's also so you can take a pause and make sure you have right intentions along the way. And during each of those breaths, you're really feeling into your heart and letting your heart talk to you and guide you along the way. And what I'd like to do is just take maybe 5 or 7 minutes for just a journal activity. And you can journal what came up for you as I went through these 10 steps that I'm working through and have worked through and refining for myself so that I can show compassion even to people who are difficult for me to love. So you can write what came up for you, but then I also want you to feel into the last time you showed someone compassion and what did it look like? What did it feel like? And were there obstacles you had to overcome in this process? And so just take 5 or 7 minutes and jot down some thoughts that come to mind. And then we'll open for discussion. Let's do 1 more minute. Can we start wrapping up, or do we still need more time? Great. So open share here. If you want to share what came up for you during the talk, or if you want to share just your reflections on compassion, feel free to unmute or pop questions or thoughts into the chat.
Hi, what should we call you?
Sheena?
Sheena's okay?
Mhm.
I didn't want to be too informal. I was thinking and trying to think of something, and really, um, I I did something that was like maybe kind of simple, but I felt like I needed to like check in with my Asian friends today, because of the shooting in Atlanta, and so like what I wrote down was that I've been on the phone all afternoon showing my concern for my Asian friends that are living here in the States, because they belong to a group that is being targeted by terrorism. And so, everyone that I texted and reached out to, they responded with expressing like appreciation, and 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 I don't know, maybe that's because they're not used to anyone checking in on them, but that part kind of caught me by surprise, because I wasn't expecting that response, by just checking in. And it was like right away, and so like it felt good and it felt right to tell them that I noticed that they may be in pain.
Thank you. Anyone else have a share?
Yeah, thank you so much for your talk. It's always it's a difficult, very difficult subject. In theory, it's easy, but I found that's very difficult with when you practice compassion. And I purposely use a difficult person. And I realized that so this difficult person is is not it's a colleague, so it's a work relationship. And I found that is so what was coming up was when you said the point, just that, imagine or visualize or see what they need, not what you need them to do. To me, that was the most difficult part, and particularly apply to this situation where I was thinking about this difficult colleague. It was easy to see his suffering because in the past, many years ago, he shared his suffering. So I saw a different side of him. So I was thinking about that aspect of him that I haven't seen in a long time. But now he's totally in the, like he's just very difficult person to deal with. And he's always an attacking, mean, type of reaction. So it was difficult for me to understand what he really needs. It was easy for me to see what he needs on my point of view. And I realized also that thinking about a situation where you said, some act of compassion that you recently remember. And I was thinking about, in relationship with my children, they're growing up, they're going through, lots. And it was easier to relate with people that I know, they're part of my family, that, I offer space and just remind them how precious they are, valuable they are, and they don't need to do anything. They don't need to change themselves. They're just so precious, just the way they are. And so thinking about that and thinking about using the same language and approach with my colleague, that is a huge challenge. So I found myself in a field that, so what I would do in this, what is the need of this person in this moment that I don't really have a close relationship with, and he's in a closing attitude and it's attacking and is always, so I stay with the question because I don't have an answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's definitely difficult when it's a difficult person who is not like a friend or a family member. Like in my instance, that example that I gave was, it was my mother-in-law. And we didn't have a relationship, but I think that part of the reason why I was able to, besides the fact that obviously she was sick and I had compassion for that, but I think the reason that I was really able to dial into compassion as an act is out of like love for my husband. So yeah, in those situations where it's a person where you don't really have like a connection at all, it's a practice, the practice. Definitely understand that. Gail, did you want to share? If not, that's totally okay too.
Sure, I'll share. So I found that it can be, when I'm able to go and really offer compassion, it's also at the same time that I am able to go and drop that reflexive thought, what about me? And there is a feeling of kind of like letting go and letting things dropping struggle. And I also think of, a sense of being very present in the moment to myself as well as to the other person, really willing to be a witness which feels like a real calling to me, to be willing to see and hear a person, as they are. And in this practice of offering someone compassion, there's some washback on me. There is a sense often of having some compassion for myself and a sense of generosity for both of us. I will say that earlier today, I got this email from this particular company. They're regularly sending marketing emails that often have a political subject line that's like, today the subject line was like, the Pope is a jerk. Literally, that was the subject line. And so I was like, I need to go and just like write an email about this. And so I started to go and write something saying, I share many of your political views, but it just feels like you're kind of haranguing, and that I was going to go and say more about, and that's, name calling. I'm not really sure there's a place for it. But then, after I was kind of like letting it settle a little bit, I kind of came back to that this man must be suffering. The man who wrote this, that he's in a constant state of outrage and fear, and so he doesn't. That there's no way that is not suffering, even though it feels like that kind of wave is coming at me and anybody else who gets the email. And so I've been trying to go and rethink about how it is that I'd like to approach and just offer my seeing of his suffering, although I don't know that it would make any difference. But my other thought was that perhaps I wouldn't be adding to his suffering as well by sending the original email that I was going to send. So that's what I was kind of working with tonight.
Thank you. I'm especially like feeling into you asking yourself that question of like, if I send this email as is, am I adding to his suffering? It's a really important question. Thank you. That's all I really. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, can I say that, Gail, and what you shared, it sounded like that person that you were envisioning on the other end of that email sounded a lot like Anita's colleague at work, like I was hearing a similarity, this kind of like shut down kind of in the suffering, activated fight mode.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of solidity going on for this individual, that's, that kind of anger is usually based on fear. And, and I often think of the Pema Children quote of, you keep eating the poison and expecting the rat to die. So yes, I mean, that's one thing that Buddhism has been helpful to me, and is giving me a framework for understanding other humans' behavior. That fear is often at the base of really bad behavior, and often it's fear of not being accepted, not belonging.
Just listening, it's interesting how the conversation just really bring you deeper, and in the theme that we were talking about, because there are so many aspects. And I think that it is really important that, you know, the compassion is opening the heart and seeing the other person suffering. It's also true that if we think about ourselves acting, right, in the same way, for example, that my colleague is acting, you know, if I think at that part of myself, inside of myself, I will, yes, feel compassion in the sense that I will understand maybe that reaction in me, same as mirroring that my colleague, where that part come from. At the same time, I wouldn't say to myself, well, it's okay. I would say to myself, yeah, I can see that part of myself suffering. I can see where this reaction that you have is coming from, but that's not okay. And I think is part of love and compassion and care. The same thing that I will do towards myself, you know, in some way. When you say, is what this cause suffering? What? Yeah, that's a good question. If I keep acting in the same way by being mean to somebody else, and I'm talking about that part, I keep perpetuating suffering for myself and for others. So there has to be a way of saying, I can see you suffering, I can see where that comes from, but that's not okay. And I think that is what I would like to hear. If somebody sees myself doing that, because I can feel like I will feel compassion, because that person is not accusing me of being mean, and you know, it actually see where that come from, so they see my suffering, and at the same time it remind me that acting like that is not okay. So this is something that is always difficult, but I think it's important, in my opinion, and through my personal experience, internal experience.
Yeah, definitely. It's that place of, you can certainly like understand why this person is suffering, but then yes, that question of like, okay, well, how can I talk to them about the behavior that happens as a result of their suffering? Like finding the words or finding the space to really like have that conversation. And like when it's a person who's closed, you know, the question is like, how do you open that? How do you open that person's heart to even receive what you have to say? It's important. It's a good thing to sit with. Yeah. Might have to add a step, communicating. Yeah.
I also think it's helpful to go and offer yourself compassion, you know, when you're on the receiving end. It's something that can be very difficult for many people to go and offer themselves compassion. But in this case, especially when you feel abused, perhaps, and perhaps sometimes, you know, when we hear people being abusive, part of us is busy kind of denying it, but that's also kind of possibly because maybe it could be true, you know, so there's, or somehow, yeah, I'm not explaining it well, but just honoring your own suffering. I think, Anita, that you're right, that that's really important, to draw boundaries and have compassion for yourself, and how this other person's behavior is impacting you.
And I think, Sheena, it really comes to my mind, your breathing section. Now, the importance of that is, it's key. Because sometimes if you really, it feels that actually there is space for yourself and that, and I really appreciate that reminder. Because when you are in the situation, it's very hard. There is so much that happens, so many, you know, like a habitual pattern. And then when you're in a stressful situation, you act in a certain way, and you know, and you do your best. Sometimes you just don't have time, and so that is those pauses are really good for checking, like you said, checking what's going on in yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, those pauses, the breaths are really like a lifeline. Just really trying to practice breathing before reacting. It's not always easy. Most of the time it's not easy, but just trying to cycle that as a reminder is helpful. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for being here live. This is my first weekly Dharma gathering talk, and I was telling Gail when I first logged on that I was so nervous. So thank you for sitting and listening, and for your participation. I really do appreciate it. And thank you for people who are watching the recording. I just want to one more time pop the link for the I Holla Back bystander intervention into the chat. That is happening on March 29th, and it is bystander intervention to stop anti-Asian harassment, which is just so important in general, but extremely important right now because of everything that's happening. So sending love again to the Asian community as they experience a lot.
Thank you so much, Sheena. I loved your talk. And thank you to everyone else joining us for tonight's online Dharma gathering. We'll be back next week on Wednesday, March 24th, when Ashley Dinges will offer a talk entitled Radiating Confidence. Consider becoming a subscriber if you're not already. We have a 7-day free trial that you can find on our website. Tell your friends. In addition, make sure to follow us on Instagram at Weekly Dharma and Facebook at Weekly Dharma Gathering. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you, Sheena.
Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anita.
Bye.
Thanks, Tina.
Bye.
Good night.